Hey everyone, good to see you. And today our topic is going to be about career clarity and 4 uncomfortable truths about it. Now, if it's your first time here, my name is Dr. John Tam. I am a career coach and I help people find career clarity and transition into their dream careers. And that's why this topic is so close to my heart because it's about career clarity. So today I'm going to cover the 4 uncomfortable truths about it, and then after that we're going to move on to the Q&A. If you got any questions, feel free to drop it in the comment box, and I'll get to it. Right? And I hope to have an awesome session with you guys and have a great conversation. So if you got any questions, just feel free to drop it in the box now because I will get to it. All right. So first off, the first uncomfortable truth about career clarity is that most people have never been taught how to find their career in their lives. Education has generally failed us in this regard. If you look at, the Ontario curriculum or any other curriculum around the world, education has not really addressed career or finding one's career path. And so, in a very real sense, that's a lot of times a lot of the trouble that people have is with that, right? And a lot of times that leaves the responsibility upon the individual, and sometimes it falls. If you're lucky, you have family who will give you advice. If you're lucky, you'll have mentors who give you advice or good teachers who will give you advice, and perhaps you'll be inspired by your topic and you really want to pursue that. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes you pursue something because, well, it's what everyone else is taking. It's what my friends are taking. It's what people say is lucrative. And that's generally not a good idea. When you pursue a career because of what it gives you, whether it's more money or whether it's status or whether it's whatever it is that it can give you, a lot of times if you pursue it for what you get out of it, you make the motivation not about what you do, but about what you get. And when it's about what you get, what happens is that it becomes extrinsic motivation. And what extrinsic motivation is, and the research has been done, very thoroughly on that, is that extrinsic motivation takes away from the inherent enjoyment of something. And without the inherent enjoyment, you won't be creative, you won't be inspired, and you won't be passionate about what you do, right? That's just the reality of it. And you kind of live like a very mundane career doing, just what you gotta do to pay the bills, right? And that is oftentimes the very first mistake that people do. Of course, if you're able to find something that you love and at the same time that pays well, that's great also. So that's the first uncomfortable truth. People never really learn how to do it properly because it's just not something that's thoroughly covered in our education system, in our upbringing, and so on. So what does that mean? Well, it goes back to the idea of Alice in Wonderland and her meeting the Cheshire Cat, which is point number 2. If you don't know where you want to go, then any path will take you down, will take you there, right? And that's, the story in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. When she met the Cheshire Cat, it's like, hey, can you tell me where to go? It's like, where do you want to go? It's like, I don't know. Then any road will take you there. And that's basically, what that conversation was to that effect. So, and oftentimes that's what people struggle with. Like, okay, I never really figured out what I really wanted to do. And so people will tell you what's good advice, like, what they think is good advice. Hey, you should take this path, you should take that path. And as a result, you go all over the place, right? Because the paths are all over the place. And at the end of the day, other people's paths may not be your own, because here, in this channel, we talk a lot about personality, Big 5 personality traits. If you don't know what that is, go take the free Big 5 personality traits test that's in the description below. Quick, easy, gives you a very good high level view of what type of personality you have and what kind of career is the best suited for you. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. So for example, if someone is very extroverted and they're interested in a career of seeing a lot of social action, right? And you're an introverted individual, then obviously that's not going to be a good fit for you. If you are very open-minded, right? You like to try new things. You fall for the shiny diamond syndrome, which is like, hey, I want to learn this, I want to learn that, I want to learn so many different things. Well, what's going to happen is, if in a traditional industry or a traditional position, which doesn't really let you learn too much or doesn't allow you to flex too much in terms of learning and just trying your hand in new things, new projects, what that it's going to do is it's going to bore you very quickly, and it's not a very good career fit for you, right? So different aspects of career, of your personality, needs to be aligned with your career. And oftentimes people may give you advice like, hey, this is very stable, you should go for that, right? I'm Chinese, and one of the things that we hear a lot in the Chinese community is like, you should be a professional, right? And you should be a lawyer, doctor, accountant, or whatever, right? And these are things that are established industries that will pay well, and so on. And a lot of people decide to do that. I've heard a story where a Middle Eastern individual, Egyptian, he went to get his parent. He was very competent, and he wanted to be an engineer, but his parents wanted him to be a doctor. So his parents paid for his tuition all the way through med school. And at the end of med school, after 10 years in med school, finishing residency and everything, he got his diploma. And what he did was he slapped it onto his parents, like, okay, I got it now. I'm gonna go study engineering, right? And that's the conversation that took place. Other people's paths may not be the one that you want to take, right? And a lot of different people will impose it on you. And at the end of the day, it's your life that you're living, and you need to figure out where you want to go, because other people's journeys, other people's paths are not going to be exactly relevant to you. Now, the next uncomfortable truth that I want to talk about is, at some point you're bound to be stuck. And because if you don't know where you want to go, like, you're gonna hit a dead end at some point, right? A lot of people, for my clients, a lot of people, they end up working, and a lot of the jobs, the first job out of college, it fell on their lap. The next job, it fell on their lap. But next job afterwards, it fell on their lap, right? Basically, they keep on having job opportunities that fall on their lap, and then they evaluate it, and yeah, let's go ahead of it. Like, oh, my old boss wants to bring me back in their team, right? Because they liked how we worked before. And so a lot of times what happens is that whatever falls in your lap becomes your career path. And that's very, if you are lucky, if you're really lucky, and that is, what falls in your lap is exactly what you wanted and what is truly satisfying, then awesome. But a lot of times people, you can't just resign yourself to luck. What happens a lot of times is that these things fall into your lap, and you take it and you realize, like, oh, wait a second, something's off. Or this is not the development I want to take, but it's my mentor is giving it to me, and I think it's an awesome opportunity, at least according to my mentor. And you realize that, wait a second, it's not what I want to do, but you're already on that path, and it's very hard to get out of that path because it's a relationship. You owe it to your mentor for that opportunity, or you owe it to yourself to see this through, or out of responsibility and so on. Before long, years have gone past, and you're like, where's my career going? I feel stuck. Something is off, and I'm unhappy, right? And a lot of times these are the conversations that take place when my clients come to see me. And so, yeah, letting things fall in your lap and letting whatever happen usually is not a very good recipe for your career. And so which brings me to the next point. Well, actually, no, it's not really the next point, but the next idea, that this will spill over into all aspects of your life, right? When you are not happy in your career, you're going to be burnt out. You're not going to have the energy to be present with the people that you love. You're not going to be confident in what you do, because it's like, yeah, I just crunch numbers. Oh yeah, all I do is work with people. I just sell stuff. Oh, I just make beautiful things and stick it on the internet, and then it goes away on Instagram, right? These are all things that, yeah, sure, you kind of do that, but at the end of the day, it will spill over into all aspects of your life, and it's going to kill your motivation. It's going to kill your health. It's going to kill your mental health, right? With COVID nowadays, everyone's locked down, and everyone's working from home. Social isolation makes it even tougher, especially if you don't like what you want to do, right? That's why a lot of people nowadays are thinking of okay, I'm gainfully employed, but now that I'm away from the community where everyone's like, yeah, let's go, so let's work on this project, let's get this done. Everyone's in their home unit, and all they do is stare at a Zoom, and that's where they start feeling the dread of existence, what we call the existential dread, right? It's like, oh, do I even like this job? I kind of like working from home. I don't like to be around people. And they start questioning these things, and it will spill over, right? Sometimes, if you've been lucky, then it won't spill over, and it's tolerable. But if you found yourself in the line of work that you don't like, what happens is it will spill over. So, which brings me to my fourth point, which is the fourth uncomfortable truth, is that you need to have that clarity to get started again. It's just as simple as that. I like to use the analogy of skipping rocks, right? when you're skipping stones on a lake, for example, when you skip a stone, bam, 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 and it's going, then it's just tapping the water. It will touch the water, but it won't sink, right? And the moment it sinks, it's like it's over. But and that's kind of like how our career is. If you are skipping along and things are going well, you're not gonna sink. You're not gonna feel the overwhelmingness of life just come over you, right? What happens is that you're moving along and you have that clarity. But the thing is, it doesn't matter how fast you run, how hard you run, if you're running in the wrong direction, which is what clarity is all about. You need to have that clarity to know where you're going. What's the destination? What is the target? And so on, before you are able to have that momentum to really get started in your life again and get all the other stuff that's spilled over that I talked about in my last point, all the stuff that's spilled over to no longer be an issue. And so that you can really just get your life together again. And that's really the 4 uncomfortable truths about career clarity. Without career clarity, number 1, most people haven't been taught how to be clear in their career. Number 2, if you don't know where you want to go, then any path will take you there. The third point is, at some point you're bound to get stuck if you let things happen to you by happen chance. And the fourth point is, you need that clarity to get out of that position, right? Whether it's setting a target or setting a plan, you need that clarity to get to the next step. And that's all I have for the 4 uncomfortable truths right now. I see there's several people in the chat on this live, and feel free to drop questions down. Like if you got a situation that you want to talk about, that's what we do in this chat, right? And if you got any situation you want to talk about, any questions about anything really in your career, I'll be glad to chat about it. So leave a comment, and we can get started on the Q&A. Sometimes, it always leads to good conversation, right? And that's one of the things that's really, I really enjoy about doing lives is that, the engagement and getting to talk to people if you got questions. I do want to talk about, as you guys are typing your questions, there is a 10-second delay. One of the things that did come up to me recently on LinkedIn is I made a post about how someone I was recently on a call with someone in Southeast Asia, and one of the things that came up was, I don't know, it was with someone who isn't exactly sure whether they want to do what they're doing or not. And the conversation came up where it was like, well, what they're teaching in university is that when you exit university, one of the things that they tell you is you got to have a career path. You got to have your career path figured out, because once you exit, and that's kind of your jam, and that's where you're going to be for the rest of your life. When I heard that, I was like really surprised, because like who the heck is giving this kind of advice? Because the reality is that nowadays most of us are going to have multiple careers in our lives. So according to the American, in the US, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, what they recently published was that the average person is going to have approximately 12 to 15 careers in their lives, right? And that's a career, not a job. And with 12 to 15 careers, what that means is essentially that, okay, each job is going to, these are careers, right? So each career path is going to have approximately 2 to 5 jobs. What that means is that in most of our lives, we're going to be switching a lot of jobs. We're going to be switching a lot of careers. Another interesting fact, though, and this one is really mind-blowing, is that most of the jobs that millennials are going to work in the future haven't even been created yet. More than half of them, right? If you're 30, if you're around 30, around 50% of the jobs have not even been invented yet. And what that means is that, our skills are gonna be it's gonna be very tough to really prepare accordingly for the future labor market, right? To find work that makes you happy and so on. If you guys got questions, feel free to drop it in the comments. And the thing is, when you are, so how are you to prepare for work in the future, right? Well, there's several things. Number one, the research has shown, this is stuff that's published by McKinsey, which is the Harvard of Management Consulting. At least that's how they brand themselves. And one of the things that they say is that, well, hard skills and soft skills, right? Let's break it down that way. Hard skills, you need to go away from narrow hard skills. Narrow hard skills are those that are rote and repetitious, those that, pretty much stuff that robots and AI and automation can do. Um, and that's the stuff that is going to get replaced first in the line of fire. So what kind of hard skills should you get? You should get broad hard skills. Broad hard skills are those that involve problem solving, that involve complex solving complex problems, right? Such as, and that's why everyone's pushing for coding, right? Even 10 years ago, you have Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg saying like coding is the math of the future. You need to learn how to code. Not all of us are interested in coding, right? And there's obvious reasons for that. Um, so, however, problem solving with broad hard skills is an important skill in the future. Now, how about soft skills, right? Well, soft skills would increase in importance. And what that means is essentially you need to be a better team player. You need to be a better communicator. You need to be a better, whether it's creativity or making new stuff, right? In that case, these are things that you need to address. All right, we got a question. Angel Anthony Sierra, you asked the question, and yes, you came across one of my videos, and so you're asking this question now. I'm the driver. How would you suggest I begin making a career change, right? Change in direction. So my question for you is, obviously you dislike it, right? So is there anything that you like? And also, I remember you mentioning in the chat that there is a financial situation, right? You don't want to rely on your parents. You're 26. There's a financial situation where you gotta pay the bills, and so you're trying to sort that out, right? So just a quick question for you. I need to know more information before I can give any advice, right? Is there something that you want to do? Is there a little bit more background information that you can give me in terms of what you like to do and so on? Just gonna move this down a little bit so it's out of the way. But essentially, so Angel Anthony Sierra, we were on the video on he left a comment in the job hopping video, and one of the things that he stated was that in his he works in tractor driving tractors, and typically you work 12 to they say that you work 12 hours, but essentially what you actually work is 14 to 16 hours. You like work-life balance. You're traveling all the time, I'm assuming, and you kind of don't like it anymore, right? And so you want to switch. And so my question for you is, how are you gonna give me a little bit more background information on how you want to make a change in direction in terms of what do you got right now, and let's work with that. But my advice, if I'm to give a high-level advice right now, is you can't just say, forget my old job, I need to, and just leave, right? We have to do it responsibly. You're 26. And what that means is you probably need to set a target. The first thing about setting a target is you need to have an idea of where you want to go. Because once you set a target, then the next thing is simply a matter of planning on how to get there. And how you want to dedicate your resources, how you want to dedicate your time, your networking, upskilling, all of these things would make a major difference, right? So, for example, if you decided that you don't want to, be a driver anymore, and you want to become, just say you want to become a teacher, right? I don't even know if that's even true or not, and so you can tell me a little bit more. But if you want to just say become a teacher, well, that means you need to understand, okay, where do you want to teach? And what kind of school do you want to teach? Public or private? What topic do you want to teach? What kind of certification do you need? What kind of skills do you need? What's the nature of the work? What do you have to do? And how much money you need? And after you set a target, then you can backward plan for that, right? Okay, a little bit more information. So teaching is totally not what you want to do. Angel Anthony Sierra says, well, I've considered being an electrician or maybe investing in real estate, something where it can transition into more financial freedom. And when we're talking about financial freedom, really we're also talking about individual freedom, right? Not just free from working, but also free from, just being in charge of your own time. And that's really what a lot of people are gearing for nowadays. So there are several things. Number one, in order to invest in real estate, you definitely need to have capital, right? Because that's where it all begins. If you don't have capital, you can't invest in real estate. So if you are considering becoming an electrician, being an electrician is actually a solid job to be, right? In terms of the career prospects right now, because a lot of times, like I said in earlier, you need hard skills and soft skills. Being an electrician, you need, like, at the end of the day, you can't just have a robot go to some place and wire stuff for people. You need, people need people to be liable for these things, right? And licensed to do this kind of work. So being an electrician definitely is a solid career path, but has a positive outlook. So that's the first thing nowadays when people ask me about career advice, like, should I do this? Well, if you're gonna go into a dying field, I would say, like, hell no, don't do it, right? But being an electrician is definitely something that's solid. I know an electrician, when I was living in Philly, I know an electrician who actually, he worked, he basically ran his own business, started, just working with individual clients and, houses and whatever, like working on property and so on. And what happened over time was, because, like, he made very good money for it. He was sharing when he was fixing my electric box. One of the things that he was telling me, yeah, I make around, I make around 300 grand a year, and I just invested in property. And right now I'm working my own business. I have my own, employees, because at some point, if you're an electrician, you work with people, at some point you're not gonna be able to handle everything, right? Because that's something that people always have trouble with. What happens afterwards is you will then have to start hiring people, and a lot of people, that really gets to the point where, do you want to be a business owner, right? Some people are happy just being an electrician and just working that kind of job. Being a business owner would then mean managing people. Do you like to manage people? Are you conscientious? Are you organized? Can you juggle many, like, contracts at the same time? And do you want to work with like residences, or do you want to work in, like, working with, with businesses and so on? And once you have this kind of, like, setup, you need to decide, like, do I want to hire people? And if you're hiring people, then the nature of your job changes. You're not only just being an electrician, you're running a business, and that's a totally different animal. So a lot of times people make that mistake, right? But it's only when you become a business owner that you can really start scaling and really earning a lot of money, and you can just, all you gotta do is make a few phone calls, tell your people to go there, and so on. But at the same time, you gotta make sure these people are qualified. You gotta make sure they're representing you well. Once you have that, you can then start transitioning into real estate, right? Because if you don't have the capital, you can't do that. So my suggestion for you right now is, if you are, driving, try to minimize those hours. Try to cut it down to as little as possible, so that you can start upskilling. And there's a lot of incentives for people to go to trade school now, right? I'm in Ontario. I don't know where you're at. Let me know where you're at, and that'll give me a better idea. But I'm in Ontario, and one of the things that the government's really pushing right now is for people to go to trade. Because a lot of people are going to university, and a lot of people are not going to trade school and not developing the relevant skills. And so there's a huge demand for it. And not everyone's cut out to go to university and just study abstract topics and whatever, right? A lot of times I would say there's a lot of money to be made in trade school. And so it's a huge, I think if you want financial freedom, in terms of my understanding of being an electrician, it's a positive, it's got a lot of potential for growth, and you get to be your own boss. There is a pathway to be your own boss. There is a pathway to financial freedom once you become your own boss and owning real estate. So I would definitely say that it's a decent path to go down. Now, there are several ways that for you to figure out what you wanted, like how you should go about doing this. The first thing I would say is go conduct informational interviews. And I have a playlist on that in my channel, just called informational interviews for career exploration, right? So just look up that playlist in my channel, because what that does is it gives you a step-by-step approach on how you should call up other people, call up other electricians. You're in Rhode Island. Okay, yeah. So definitely, it's an urban place. Yeah, you're definitely in a place where there's people living, and the people are gonna need electricians, right? And it's definitely there's also, I don't think there's a problem to going to this trade school for that there, right? Because it's still quite urban. Um, so, anyways, my advice is to look up how to do informational interviews, talk to people who are electricians, and figure out the career path. How long does it take for you to upskill? How long does it take? What's your target, right? Learn about the different possible, because even being an electrician, there's so many pathways to walk. You can work for someone. You can be your own contractor, right? You can, or you can just work privately as an electrician while also driving trucks. There's a lot of possibilities. Talk to people, figure out the possibilities, and set a target. Once you set a target, all you have to do, it becomes very easy. It's just to reverse engineer it. How many years you got to school? How much you got to budget for it? Who do you need to network with? And how are you supposed to start getting your first contracts? Right? Start getting your first gigs as an electrician. And from there on, it's pretty much smooth sailing. But that will get you out of a stuck situation. Like I said in the beginning of this video, you are stuck because there is no destination, there is no target. And once you set that target and you set a plan, all that you got to do is just execute. And if you're able to do that, good for you, right? And that's really my main advice for that. But once again, you said you've considered being an electrician. Doesn't mean it's something that you've decided on. So my advice for you is to really decide on what you want to do, right? Once you've decided, and the best way to do that is to figure out, talk to people who are actually in the industry through informational interviews. If you guys got other questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. Always glad to answer whatever question. If you guys like this, give me a thumbs up as well. I really appreciate it. It would please the YouTube gods. All right. Does that help? Angel, Anthony, Sierra. If you got any questions, feel free to ask. But essentially, I think one of the things that came out in talking about, in looking at your case, is that is the industry growing? Because you're 26, and what that means, like I said before, half of the jobs that most people are gonna do, most people under at 30 years old are gonna do, haven't even been invented yet. Electricity is not going anywhere, so there's really no reason why you can't do it. And that's my main thing. Never enter an industry that's dying. There's a lot of jobs that are being replaced right now, right? And one of the things about tractor driving, is that the chances of that being replaced can be quite high, right? Like Elon Musk is, he's in Tesla. He's creating a whole fleet of automated trucks. You got to be careful of that, because that's the first thing that's the first wave. But at the same time, I was looking at a documentary recently that they're actually making I just realized my volume has been relatively low for a while. I was looking at a documentary, and what that was showing was that there's a lot of whether it's in the construction sites, a lot of it's becoming automated as well, right? In terms of the trucks, in terms of whatever machines that they need to do. So we're still going to need people to be in charge of that, because it's people that have to be liable and make these decisions. But until then, until the machines can replace people for that, it's going to be tough, right? And this is just a projection. I have a friend, right? I have a friend who works on investments, and one of the things is that one of the things that he identified was that in the future, driving is going to be a luxury, right? Because cars are going to be automated. That's what automated driving is, and we're still a few years away from that, from fully automated driving, and then for it to really scale, just scale and be deployed across the world. But what that means is that in the future, driving is going to be a luxury, and insurance for drivers is actually going to be a luxury as well. Right nowadays, everyone drives, but 5 years from now, it's difficult to say. Right? So that's one of the things. We need to be very strategic about how we approach our careers in the future, because a lot of industries are going to get disrupted. A lot of industries are going to get wiped out, and we want to get into the ones that are safe, that are profitable, and universal basic income is still, we don't know whether that's going to happen or not. A lot of countries are talking about it. But even then, it's who knows what's going to happen with universal basic income. They actually ran a pilot study on universal basic income, and the reason why I'm talking about that is like some people are not going to be working in the future. That's just a reality because it's just too competitive. One of the things about universal basic income that they've found, and they've ran pilot studies on that, is that they've deployed it in some towns, and what they realize is that approximately 50% of people reinvest the money into doing something, and they make their life better. But what they also found was that the other half of the people actually made their lives worse because of the universal basic income, because they're like, oh, okay, I don't have to work now, and so on, right? So Angel Anthony Sierra replies, thank you. Yes, I think what you said about me being sure of what I want to do is also causing my fear to make a career change, right? And if you're fearful of making a career change, that is totally normal. It's totally understandable, because the reality is that a lot of times the fear is what keeps us alive. And if you're afraid of making a career change, here's several things that I would advise you to do, right? Number one, journal it. Journal out your fear. And I've said this in the past videos, but by journaling, what you do is you move the fearful thoughts into the logical part of your brain, so that you can take action. Because it's like fear is what stops us from taking action, right? Because you're not sure what's going to happen, and we get paralysis by analysis, or we also face what we call the paradox of choice. There's too many things to choose from, right? And so we just freeze and we seize up, and we're like, okay, it's better not to do anything, because not doing anything at least is not killing me. But nowadays, when you think about it, we're not going to die. Like we're not gonna die by making a bad career choice, right? Or by taking a leap into something. At least you're not gonna die immediately. You might die a slow death, right? But that's tongue-in-cheek joke. But what happens is that when you're afraid, what you should do is turn that fear into words, and you realize what's the best that could happen and what's the worst that could happen. And when you spell it out, you realize the worst that could happen is most of the time, oh, I waste some time, or I waste some money, and I waste some energy. And that's usually the worst that could happen, right? And all these things can be, time you can't get back, energy you can't get back, but you get that experience, and money you can definitely make back. Now, if you spell it out and you find out that the upside is, okay, wow, the upside is that I can actually do something I love. I can get out of this position, get out of this job that I hate and that's gotten me stuck, and that I could move on to something better, then the upside is huge. It's like, at that point, it becomes much more easier to evaluate, do I want to make this move or not? So definitely journaling is something I would highly recommend. I would also recommend meditation and just time alone, right? And nothing like too woo-woo or anything, but if you disconnect from the internet, disconnect from everyone. I mean, it's easier now because we're in social isolation because of COVID. But if you disconnect from people for a while and all you do is just journal and reflect, be silent, your body will tell you what it wants, right? Your body would intuitively tell you, like, yeah, something is off. I don't like this, and let's do this. Let's make this move, right? So doing that is also helpful. Now, if you are extroverted, if you're introverted, that's what I would highly recommend you to do. If you're extroverted, I would actually recommend you do that as well. If you're very introverted, I would, you already have the tendency to become, to be very quiet and keep to yourself, right? So if you're introverted, I would actually recommend you to talk to someone and ask, like, hey, is this something that you want to do? And just map it out. And that's what the informational interviews are for, because it will give you more information so that it gives you a clear path forward. Because without a clear path, everything's like, there's a fog of, I don't know if you play video games, but there's like a fog of war. You don't know what's in front of you, if it's dark, if you haven't explored it yet. And by removing that fog, what it does is clear things up, and it allows you to take action. Because if it's dark and out there, it's scary and you don't want to take a step out, right? Let's see. My cousin worked for ADP. Him and his wife made a career change. Now they own a juice bar, selling organic juices and other things. His wife also sells her own CBD brand and a few other things. They're in their 40s, so obviously it took time, but I admire it. Yeah, anything good usually takes time. And a lot of times, like, on Instagram, on social media, on YouTube, on TikTok, on whatever, right? Guessing by your demographic, I assume you're on Instagram and TikTok. But what you usually find is that people are like, oh yeah, I exploded on social media and I run my business or whatever, right? Or some people, run a physical business, a juice bar, and a lot of times, yeah, that's anything good will take time to build, and you should totally. I mean, if that's what inspires you, talk to them, right? Do an informational interview and find out, hey, is this something that you want to do? Or maybe like if they're your cousin, why can't you like learn the craft from them, work under them, and it's like, hey, I want to start, I want to start another branch somewhere else. That's a possibility. If you like the point is right now you want to get out of trucking, out of tractor driving, right? And what that means is that you need to find an alternative for your income. And if you can find something that allows you to go back to school, and if you want to be an electrician or whatever else you want to be, go back to school to upskill that, and then to close that skills gap and then move towards it. Now, this is important, is that you don't want to go back to school for before doing all the informational interviews, because what that means is that you're gonna be spending a lot of money, like just investing that money into doing something that you may not like, right? And at the end of the day, you will waste time, money, and energy once again. So do your information interviews, follow the process of it usually takes about 2 months. But after you do these information interviews, you'll have a clear path forward. And what happens from there is you realize hey, actually, I don't want to be an electrician. I want to partner with my cousin to work on a juice bar and then start my own juice bar using the same approach. And that's what I want to do. And if that's the case, awesome, right? You save yourself X amount of dollars and how many years of going back to school to be an electrician. Or maybe you want to do something called a passion project, right? And what a passion project is just to spend 30 days fully immersing yourself into that field that you're interested in, right? So stay where you're at, make sure you have a steady income, but come to terms with the fact that right now where you're at is only for the money. You're not in there for the long run, and that removes the pain. It's like you've come to terms I'm not there for the long run. I'm just here to get that paycheck, and it's okay. Right? And it's okay to not feel exactly motivated about it. Like I said at the beginning, the paycheck is something that just isn't, it's what, it pays the bills, and that's really what it is. But if you come to terms with that's what it's for, then what that means is, okay, you can start working on something else and do a passion project. 30 days, immerse yourself into that and see if you like it or not, right? Immerse yourself into Twitter. So, for example, one of the things that people like to do is, some people like to transition into coding, and so what they do is there's a hashtag called 100 Days of Code, and 100 Days of Code is basically a community of people who are immersing themselves into coding for 100 days and just to learn that skill so that they can transition to become a developer. So if that's so find a Twitter handle, find a community of people who are transitioning to that. Find an accountability partner or a community and basically join them, spend 30 days to fully immerse yourself into doing that, and you realize, oh, I like this, oh, I don't like this, right? Now, the nature of the work that you handle is one thing. So if you're an electrician, I assume you're doing electrician stuff, right? Like visiting sites, fixing the problem, and so on. And if that's what you like to do, then okay, it's a good fit for you. However, there's also other considerations, other variables that would make your life miserable or make it awesome. One of them is working in the company culture, right? Oh, do I want to work in a small company or do I want to work in a big corporate culture, right? Those are very different environments. Do you want some people like to work in a startup environment because things are going all the time. And there's a huge upside, but then it's a little bit more rocky, but at the same time, it's exciting. I know some people who work in the Big Four. Actually, I have a friend who worked in McKinsey in Shanghai. He worked in McKinsey for Shanghai thinking it was his dream job. He got in. He was like, yeah, he's one of my basketball friends. He flew over to Shanghai, and after 1 year, he left because he's like, this is too much. It's too crazy. I don't like it. I'm clocking 60 to 80 hours per week, and there's no life, and it's just not for him. And so he left. Right? So that's what these passion, that's why do your due diligence, whether it's a passion project, whether it's informational interview, whether it's working under, learning from your cousin. These are all things that would help you in the long run. If you guys agree, give me a like. and or subscribe to my channel. Would really appreciate that. It would it would help a lot. Also, I mean, if you guys got any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Right? I mean, does that help, Angel, Anthony, Sierra? Let me know. But I think, a lot of times people all often think, it goes back to the point that a lot of people think that once you are set in a career path, there's really no other way out. You're kind of stuck there. And the reality is that no, we should don't focus on the titles. That's one thing I tell everyone, right? The advice that I would tell everyone is don't focus on the titles, because the titles would change all the time. Director of Operations, what does that even mean, right? Director of Operations. It would mean one thing in the Big Four. It would mean another in FANG, right? FANG is Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. And I forgot the other A. Alphabet, Amazon. But anyways, like if you go to like the Big Four, FANG, you go to a startup, Director of Operations would mean something different at every place. And so don't focus on the title, because even when you write your resume, the best thing, like if you write the title Director of Operations, it's like people are like, at the end you still have to describe what does that even entail, right? And people, a lot of resume coaches will tell people like, yeah, you gotta use action words, you gotta use quantitative data to prove the XYZ. But at the end of the day, it's about communicating your value and the skills that you have. So my advice to everyone on this call is essentially don't hang on to the title. Don't refuse to transition out of something just because of a title. I was recently on a call with an old friend of mine, and the situation that she's in right now is like, she's a senior director and she might get promoted to becoming a partner. And what happened, and this was at a consulting company, and what's happening is that, she feels like she doesn't want to leave her job. And the reason for that is because, if I leave the job, I'm losing the title. And I'm like, yeah, but do you want to be a partner? And it's like, when you become a partner, the nature of the job changes. She has to set strong boundaries. She has to say no to people. She has to manage people. She has to be the person who says no to a lot of things, right? Shoot things down. And that's just not what she likes to do. It drains her. It's energy sucking, right? And we find this in the Big Five personality traits. If you are highly agreeable, people like you because you're agreeable and they can work with you. But at the same time, if you are if you're too agreeable, it still is draining to set these boundaries and keep enforcing them all the time, because people keep stepping on your toes. So if you're agreeable, that's one of the things that they struggle with, right? Agreeable people tend to work in service-related jobs, such as customer service, for example. And a lot of times, if the customer service, the culture is good and the company supports you, then what happens is that you flourish, because the company won't throw you under the bus whenever someone complains. But a lot of times, that's usually not the case. Some companies still hold on to the idea that the customer is always right, and they end up throwing their customer service reps under the bus, and life sucks, right? And that's when you want to leave. So anyways, going back to my colleague, my friend. What happened was, she's at this crossroads right now. I was like, I don't know if I want to leave because I'm a senior director. And I'm like, don't hold on to the senior director title. What kind of skills do you have? And she's like, yeah, here are my skills. I'm like, based on what you're telling me, the skills that you have, you could basically apply to so many different places. These are high demand skills that people want to hire for. So that's the thing. Never hang on to the title. Like I said, most of the skills that you're going to use, if you are 26 or if you're in your late 20s or early 30s, a lot of skills that you're going to use in your life have probably just been invented, or hasn't even been invented yet, right? Like I said, half the jobs that the 30-year-olds are going to do haven't even been created yet. So disruption is the new norm. Change is going to be the new norm, and so on. If you guys got any questions, feel free to drop in the comment box, right? Despite me enjoying talking, I can't just talk forever. So I see some people in the chat. If you got questions, feel free to drop it in, because it really does help the conversation. Yeah, and so let's see. Anything else I can help with? Because that's what this live is for, right? Just answering questions. You guys got questions, would be glad to answer them. just gonna grab a drink of water. So, let's see. What else can we talk about? Well, for one thing that I think would be really helpful to a lot of people is, how should I say this? Is writing an inventory of their skills and understanding their own personal brand, their own career brand. And what's a career brand? Well, a career brand is essentially oh, okay. Jennifer Lowe. It's got a question about job shadowing, but not know how to do it, right? So job shadowing, I've done it before. I actually advise a lot of people to do it. And one of the things about job shadowing is it's a good way to get an insight on what someone's work day is like. And so one time I actually did a job shadow of my headmaster. When I was a teacher, I'm like, I like to job shadow you to learn, what it's like to be an administrator. When I was still like a high school teacher, right? And he was like, yeah, sure, drop in. And so he was very kind to oblige that. And basically, I followed him for a few hours to understand what he's doing, sit on the side, take notes, have a notepad, and just like, hey, can I take some notes while while shadowing you to learn about what you do. And for me, that was a very helpful experience. Now, there are several things that you gotta make sure to do before you ask for a job shadow. Number one, you have to do the informational interviews first, right? Because the informational interviews would allow the person to like understand like, oh, this is what you're looking for. You're seriously considering this, right? It's a job shadow is a bigger ask than a 20-minute coffee. I mean, it's just straight up that way, right? A 20-minute coffee, you buy the coffee, 20-minute in and out, you're done. But and if this is something that's, you're seriously considering, for example, if you want to seriously consider being I can use another teaching example, teacher, right? Then what happens is, on that information interview, you ask about the person. I have a playlist on informational interviewing on my channel. It's all about career exploration. It's not about informational interviewing to network for a job because that's just slimy. It's all about career exploration. And in that informational interview, what you can do is you ask for multiple people, to connect with, right? It's like, hey, Nava, thank you so much for your time at the end, right? Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate learning about your line of work and what you do. I'm wondering, is there anybody that you highly respect that you can connect me with in your line of work so that I can learn more about what you do, right? And so, usually after after that 20-minute conversation, if that's like the final ask, they're generally okay with it, right? Especially if you've made a good impression. And what happens after that is, you connect with another individual. From all these individuals, then you pick the person that you feel like you connected the most with. And then you also ask them, hey, I've talked to like 5 of your friends. I've talked to 5 people within our network, and I'm really, really interested in particularly your line of work. So, for example, if you're interested, there's different, like even within education, for example, there's like the high school teacher, there's a middle school teacher, there's elementary, and there's kindergarten. There's also curriculum writers. There's also administration. There's also like directors of different programs, right? There's so many different components even within education in one single school. So you find that line of work that you want to shadow, that you're interested in, and ask to shadow them. From there, pretty much ask like, hey, just tell them approximately that you're looking to shadow because your intention is to learn about that career and whether you want to transition into this career. And it's it's going to be a huge, I'll always be ready to provide value, whether so it's like you don't always want to be taking, right? But what happens is if someone is saying yes, then go shadow for 2 to 3 hours. Like if it's like education, for example, the morning, right, between the start of work and lunch, or maybe after lunch and the end of the day. Don't if you ask for the whole day, that's a little too much. But if you ask for half a day, it's a pretty reasonable ask. And so yeah, and they need to talk to the relevant people and so on, and then you just shadow them. What happens is you're just you're a very big fly on the wall, but you just follow them around and you see what they do. Don't talk, don't comment on anything, just hold a notepad and just listen and observe. And what you want to do is you want to ask for a typical day on what you'll be doing and so on. If it's just you and that individual that you're shadowing, then you can ask questions, right? If they're allowing you to shadow them, they're generally open to being asked questions. It's like, oh, so what is it that you're doing and so on at this point, and based on that, buy lunch, right? Be grateful. It's a human relationship. No one has to let you shadow them, and it's always a bigger ask than an informational interview, right? So buy them lunch for sure, right? Whether it's before the shadowing or after the shadowing, buy them lunch, buy them whatever, right? Gift them, send them an article like after the shadowing. Definitely send an email thanking them, and that you're gonna work on the next steps in advancing towards this career, because by the time you're shadowing, you're pretty sure that this is something that you want to do, right? Like you're probably like 80% sure at that point. The shadowing is like just the confirmation to see if there's any red flags that tell you you don't want to do this, right? So yeah, afterwards, send them an email, nurture that network, keep them updated, right? So for example, if you're transitioning to school, tell them like, oh, I'm applying to teachers college, and I thought, I still remember our job shadowing half a year ago, and I really appreciated it, and I just want to give you a quick update that I'm applying to teachers college. That person will probably, they might see the email and say, oh, congrats, or maybe they just see it and then like close it, right? Yeah, at that point it doesn't really matter, but you want to keep them in a loop in your advancement, because at that point they've already invested in you. All right. What if they work on confidential tasks? For example, I want to be a career coach, and those are normally confidential, right? So Jennifer, great question. My answer to that is that it's their responsibility, right? It's their responsibility to set the boundaries for their work. So for example, if you're interested in becoming a career coach, there's so many different pathways to do that, by the way. But it's their job to say no. Like, oh, sorry, this is a confidential conversation. I can't let you sit in. Or maybe their client is okay with you sitting in, and it's just like, if it's something like career clarity, that the things that I work on with my clients, then yeah, it's difficult for you to sit into this conversation. However, if it's something like this kind of format where I'm providing coaching, on YouTube, pretty much openly, then you are already kind of sitting in. At the same time, if it's something like resume review or cover letter review, these aren't exactly very confidential things, right? And so I think it's up to the career coach to set that boundary, to tell you like, yeah, shadow me here, don't shadow me here, and so on, right? And it's their responsibility to let people know whether that you're shadowing or whether you're not shadowing. And so yeah, don't worry about that. It's your job to ask, it's their job to say no. And if they say no, don't get too discouraged, because we're gonna that's another thing, right? When we're talking about like informational interviews or job shadowing, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So one advice I give people for informational interviews is, if you have a target company you're interested in, for example, if you're interested in working at Loblaws, for example. Loblaws is a supermarket chain in Ontario, right? Then what happens is that, well, a lot of people would email people in Loblaws, like just say you're interested in working in Loblaws in not the sales, but just say the supply chain, right? You want to work in supply chain for Loblaws, and you message people and you network with people on LinkedIn, and you only find like 3 people, and you message all 3 hoping that they'll say yes. The reality is that the response rate for something like an informational interview is approximately 10%, right? And informational interviews come before job shadowing. You don't ask for a job shadow before the interview. And so what happens is that you email them first, and you contact them, and if they say no and you only ask 3 people, you're gonna feel shot down. What you do is you literally need to dedicate one whole day to messaging people at Loblaws at Walmart. Walmart for their grocery supply chain, at Sobeys, which is another branch in supermarket franchise in Canada, Canadian supermarket, superstore, and whatever company that is in a similar line of work. Message all those people in the supply chain that work under supply chain and ask them for an informational interview. Right? I'm talking about like message 50 of them, tailored. And what happens is that you're going to start realizing that, okay, out of that 50, maybe, if you're lucky, maybe 5 would reply, right? Because at the end of the day, it is an ask from a stranger. Of course, it's easier if you have a referral, and that makes it much easier, right? But if it's from a stranger, what happens is that the response rate is about 10%, 8 to 10%. And after that, you got your foot in the door. You have that conversation, you have the information interview. If you impress, right, you ask all 5, is there someone else that you can connect me with? Then if you impress, what that creates is it creates a snowball effect, right? You start snowballing your network within a specific industry. And then at that point, you're also getting more data points, you're getting more information. And after you have enough information that you feel like, okay, this is something I'm seriously interested in, then you ask the people if you can job shadow them. Because you asking for a job shadow out of a blue is too much, right? After the informational interview, then the next step is that's suitable is a job shadow. And even then, I would say like it really depends on the individual. A lot of people don't like being shadowed, especially by a stranger. So the best thing to do is to just ask people who have that relationship with you, who you've really nurtured that network, right? And that's the thing with networking. A lot of times when people think about networking, they feel it's like really really tough, because networking is they feel it's slimy. It's like they always have an ask, right? And networking really does feel slimy if you have an ask. Like if that's why you network, right? You want to network because you want to ask them, so you want to get something from them, right? If you're networking because you're genuinely interested in that industry, you want to learn more, and you want to be like part of the community on LinkedIn, you want to follow the hashtags on LinkedIn or on Twitter for that specific industry. So for example, Jennifer, if you're interested in career coaching, then start following the career coach hashtags. Start networking and adding career coaches to your network and seeing what they post, engaging with them, having conversations, and learning about what they do and how they survive, right? So one of the things that's interesting about career coaches is a lot of us are slashers, right? For me, I'm a full-time career coach. And what a slasher is someone who works, who works in recruitment, for example. They work at recruiting in a certain company, or HR in a certain company, because those are very interrelated. And then they'll also, add a slash career coach. And you start realizing that a lot of career coaches actually don't do it full time, or they do it as a side hustle, or they, and even then, like a career coach, there's different niches. So for example, I'm a career clarity coach, right? I work at the intersection of life coaching and career coaching, which is basically helping people, hey, what do you want to do in your life? What is the career that you want to do? And let's work towards that. Some people, they call themselves a career coach, but what they actually are, and this is what I prefer to call them, is I like to call them job coaches, which is essentially they help people find jobs. They help people tailor their resume. They help people, optimize their cover letter or LinkedIn profile and so on. I like to call these people job coaches, because it's not exactly dealing with career or executive issues. There's also like career coaches who are actually executive coaches, right? Or leadership coaches. So career coach as an industry is very broad. And even within there's like so many sub niches and so many, so many different problems that people specifically address. And what you're going to find is if you, put, just career coach on your title, right? What you're going to find is that people don't know where to put you. People don't know how to position you, right? That's why even in my headline on LinkedIn, I'm very specific about the problem that I deal with. What's the problem I deal with? Which is career clarity, and the people I work with, who are specifically ambitious millennial professionals, right? Or ambitious millennial professionals, really. And so at the end of the day, anybody who sees my headline knows that this is the type of person I want to work with. This is the problem I solve. And if you like following my content, then awesome, right? I produce a lot of content on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And of course, anybody on this chat or seeing this video afterwards, whether it's a rerun or whatnot, always glad to connect on LinkedIn, because that's really where I have a lot of conversations, and also on YouTube as well. So does that help? I mean, does that make sense? If you want to learn more about an industry, start with informational interviews for career exploration, not for landing a job. And then if you really want to advance to the stage of job shadowing, that should be in the later stages, right? And the informational interviews, the point of that is to set a target so that you can write a career plan, so that you can backward design and reverse engineer that career plan so that you can transition into that specific line of work. But at the end of the day, it depends on, you have to do the internal work, right? Do you have the clarity that this is what you want to do for your career? Do you have the clarity that, this is what's going to make you happy? It's going to pay the bills? Because you don't want to transition to something that's going to make you, broke and poor and miserable as well. We have to be very tactful about it. I have 3 kids, for example, and one of the things is that I simply would refuse jobs. I did get job offers that would require me to work away from home. And I've been working from home for like the last 7 years of my life. I will not work away from home anymore. I want to be present for my kids. At least my oldest daughter is 11. My youngest son is 6, right? I got 3 kids. And I will not work away from home. I like to be around them. I like them to be part of my workday. And that's why I chose the line of work that I did, right? That's one of the major reasons why. Family is of the utmost importance to me. A lot of people say that family is of utmost importance to them, but their decisions can often reflect otherwise. I'm not throwing shade at those parents, but I'm just saying, like, even when I work with my coach, right? And most coaches have coaches. When I work with my coach, that's one of the things my coach indicated for me is like, hey John, you know what? One of the things is I really noticed is that I asked him, like, what kind of advice, what kind of advice do you have to give me? And one of the things that he said, like, you know what, John, I noticed that for you in all our conversations, family always comes first, and don't ever forget that, right? We were wrapping up our session because I've worked with this coach for 2 years, great guy, love him to death. And it would just our time just ran its course, and that was his advice. And it's like, okay, it's good to know, because you need to have that clarity. You need to have an understanding of your internal values so that your career is aligned to that. Never align your life to your career, because at the end of the day, and this is like what all the research has shown, the Harvard happiness studies, or when you interview, like when people study people who are retired, they find that people who are retired tend to be the happiest, right? Because they've lived a life, and their outlook on life is much happier, and their advice is always the same. It's consistently the same. Your happiness level is contingent on the social relationships that you have, and the tightest social relationships that you can ever have is your family. So for me, I always play the long game, right? Whether I'm producing content on YouTube, doing these kind of lives, that's what I do, the long game. Whether it's with even for my long-term happiness, family first, like workplace relationships second, right? And so that's the choice that I made. I have clarity on that, and that's align my career to that. But I don't do it the other way around. If I was pursuing, for example, if, like I said at the very beginning of this session, right? If I am extrinsically motivated, my goal is money. What I hope to get out of my career, right? For example, power, or money, right? Or freedom, financial freedom. A lot of times what happens is that you end up devoting yourself to that career, and what you start realizing is, oh, okay, yeah, I get power and money, but there's really no end to it. There's no end to satisfying that. How much is really enough, right? In the research, in the psychological research, it actually shows that most people are satisfied with approximately, depending on where you live, right, and the living standards. But in North America, in Toronto, a very in the Greater Toronto area, you need approximately $70,000 to $80,000 to be happy, right? And any more money after that will hit diminishing returns in terms of happiness. So you earn 10K more, the happiness will actually start plateauing. It starts to not matter as much. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right? Understand the science behind what makes people happy. It's relationships, it's community, and it's not exactly the extrinsic things that make you happy. Because you can always have more power, you can always have more money, you could always have, and at the end of the day, you lose whatever freedom that you have, right? Which is, I guess, kind of the Wonder Woman. I don't know if you guys watch Wonder Woman yet, because my whole family sat down and watched Wonder Woman and like the Stone of Lies. Okay, spoilers here, spoiler alert. But what happens is, like, the more you want something, there's actually a price to pay for it. Actually reminds me of a video game I played before where there's like 2 timelines. Chrono Cross, the sequel to Chrono Trigger, a classic in the 90s. And Chrono Cross, one of the stories is there's this, in one of the timelines is the dad and the son was like super tight, but the dad was like, oh, I'm broke. He's a traveling artist, and I'm with my son, but my son loves me. I'm broke, and we're suffering. But in the other timeline, in the alternate universe, what happened was the dad chose to run a business, and what happened was the dad is a multi-billionaire, cajillionaire, whatever, and the son actually was like, I wish I had more time with my dad, right? And so it goes back to one of the videos I made a while back. It's called Choose, I called it like my best advice for millennials. Essentially, it's like choose your hard. Life is hard. I mean, planning, budgeting is hard, but being broke is hard as well. Conflict resolution is hard, especially with your partner or with your family. Conflict resolution and communication is hard, but so are broken relationships. Working in a career that drains you is hard, but transitioning, but working in a career that you love, I guess that's less hard, right? But that transition may be difficult as well. And so at the end of the day, we all gotta choose our hard. We all gotta pick our poison. And that's one of the things that when you go to the root of all the human experience, and that's one of the things I like to look at as religion. And it's not just Christian. I'm a Christian by practice, but there's also other faiths, right? Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism. I mean, all these other isms. All the common tenet for all of them is that life is suffering, right? Life is painful. And so really you got to mitigate that suffering and you got to minimize it. And it's either you do your due diligence in putting in the effort, putting in the time to solve that problem, or letting that problem fester and deal with its implications. Anyways, I think that's a wrap for today. I mean, it's 3:00 already. Usually commit 1 hour to these lives. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe, would really appreciate it. Free resources in the details below, a free Big 5 personality traits test that you can take to learn what kind of career characteristics is a good fit for your personality. Very quick, high level, bird's eye view kind of test, right? Literally takes 1 to 2 minutes, tops. There's also a guide in the link below where I break down how to find your dream career and to find that career direction. And there's also a free webinar, free training that I have, which pretty much outlines my whole strategy on how to find your dream career. All right, and that's all in the details below. Don't forget to check it out. And if you enjoyed it, then hope to see you next week, right? I do this every week. And so all right, take care. Have a great one.